And this guy has forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. Put it together for Michael Shure, everybody. Michael, it seemed as though there was little that Joe Biden could do, even if he aced the exam, that was going to turn back the call for him to step down. In other words, the damage done by that, quote, debate or television appearance was so significant that even as impressive as he was, I thought on some of the details, his gaffes are, of course, amplified.
Yeah, I mean, that's what is so interesting about this, is that Joe Biden's been making these kind of gaffes for 40 years. He's been calling Vice President Harris Vice President Trump. He's been calling Putin Zelensky since before any of these people were names we knew. That's just been kind of his stock and trade. After that debate, those little things can't be forgiven, because people are paying closer attention. So people who didn't know that this was part of Joe Biden's, basic makeup of making flubs and gaffes and that sort of thing, people who didn't know that pay closer attention to it now. And so it matters more. Whether or not it matters in the big picture doesn't matter. It matters to voters who are less familiar with this, or it furthers a narrative. So, the debate only furthered a narrative. People were talking about Joe Biden being too old to run for president in the months leading up, in the year leading up to that debate. What that debate showed was, hey, we might be right. And, I think there's nothing he can do to undo that. A really good press conference, which last night wasn't. It was a fine press conference. It showed that someone who we know is good on the issues, who we know is good on foreign policy, who we know has a familiarity with the geopolitical world, flexed that a little bit. But there wasn't anything, he did a lot of his Bidenisms. He did a lot of his starting to say something. He's forgetting what he's going to say, so he says anyway, as a way of getting out of that. Charming, usable, it works, but it's not enough. And I think that the Democrats are realizing that. And so I don't think it's happening tomorrow, but I think that after the Republican convention, the Democrats are going to get serious about seeing who their nominee is going to be, and it's not set in stone.
The polling I was mentioning earlier is oddly the latest Washington Post ABC News poll. It's a national poll again. But it has the two dead even, 46.
Yeah, I mean, and that just shows you how winnable this election is for the Democrats, not how winnable it is for Biden. To me, anyway. And I think we make light of some of or I certainly make light of polling. I think these polls matter because now there are people paying closer attention, and the fact that Biden is even with Trump in this poll, which may be an outlier, may not be, I think tells us that this election, even with this doddering president who has seemed to be over the last couple of weeks, even with that, Donald Trump is beatable. Even Joe Biden can pull even with him. And I think that, and I'm somebody who, Mark, I don't say bad things about the president. I don't think bad things about him. But I think from a purely strategic standpoint, you have to look at this candidacy not being the best shot for the Democrats.
It doesn't take an old white guy to beat another old white guy. You believe that you could get a Kamala Harris in there? I want to hear your answer, and you can answer let's consider that part of the question. But I was saying earlier, the wide open George Clooney thing where everybody is in, and it's we're going to talk about issues and it'll be great, and you're going to hear all of the things that the Democrats concerned. That struck me as an absolutely awful idea.
Well, it's coming from an actor who has a lot of money, who's in the tequila business and can give money and can dictate. The Democrats would be foolish to follow the edict of George Clooney, and they won't. I mean, he's the kind of person who reaches Democrats on a huge level, right? I mean, so the Barack Obamas, the Bill Clintons, the Joe Bidens, so they're up on a stratosphere. But rank and file Democrats don't pay a great deal of attention to that. And the Democratic Party itself has rules, and they're not dictated by George Clooney. They're dictated by money people in some ways, but that's not how the process is certainly not dictated that way. So the Harris question is less is complicated now, but it's really not that complicated, in my opinion. I think that the Democrats have more to lose by not having Harris at the top of the ticket, were it not to be the president, than by putting her at the top of the ticket. And the zeitgeist around Kamala Harris now, how we think of her today, is going to be very different than when she is the nominee. Because when someone is the nominee, it brings this sort of gravitas, it brings this attention. You rise to that occasion, and she will have the whole weight of the Democratic Party behind her in a way that they won't be questioning their candidate as they are right now. Some of them may say, this isn't my favorite. A lot of people don't like the vice president for whatever reason. I think people will be forgiving for a finite period of time until November, and that bearing that she comes out squeaky clean, and people and that the best parts of Kamala Harris rise to the occasion. The other thing is that the politics of it look really good too, getting voters energized. So you're imagining now Harris instead of Biden, but what you're not imagining is vibrant, energetic, sharp, quick retorts versus Joe Biden, but also versus Donald Trump. So there's going to be this energy that this race has lacked from both sides for quite a long time. And I think that it's going to energize some of the Democratic bases that need energy. And that's women, that's young women, that's African Americans. And so I really think that, and young voters to an extent, who see something that they can have an easier time identifying with. Doesn't mean she's going to win, but I think she has a better chance of winning than the president does.
That's extraordinary. And so implied in that banner that Kim put up, is America too misogynist and racist for a black female president? Implied in your answer is no, America's not too misogynist and racist.
It's implied that it's not. I mean, we elected a black president before. That's not new to the Democratic Party. It's not new to the country. It was a male, but it was a male with a funny name. It was a male who was portrayed as Muslim by some of his opponents, even if his direct opponent said that was not the case. So the chips are always stacked against a minority running for national office. There's no question about that. But I think that what Harris has working against her more is that she's not terribly popular. Vice presidents tend not to be terribly popular, and some of them win. I mean, I would say that George H.W. Bush is an example of that. He wasn't very popular. He ended up winning. Al Gore, somewhat popular. I think people found him to be kind of middle of the road. Whether or not he won can be argued. Will be argued forever. But I think that the notion that Kamala Harris, the race identity of it is too. I'm not saying lazy in that way. It's just too easy to go to. I think that the problem she's going to have are the preconceived notions of how good she might be. And one thing, Mark and Kim, to remember about Harris is one of the issues that Democrats have in their Achilles heel along with immigration is crime. And what was Kamala Harris? She was discomfiting to a lot of Democrats because she wasn't tough. She was too tough on crime. And at this time, she might be just the flavor of Democrat, whether you like it or not, for wooing independent voters. She's someone who was too tough on crime for Democrats in California in many ways, as Attorney General and as District Attorney. So I think there are reasons to find her appealing in ways that haven't even been explored yet.
One of the you listed her attributes or the things that she could bring to the campaign. One of them, I think, is to have a woman, and I don't necessarily know if it matters what woman, but in this case, Kamala Harris, at a time when they're taking away women's reproductive rights. So this is a key issue for a lot of voters. It might be that it is the time for a woman simply because this has become such a hot point.
Well, yeah, I would agree as well. And I would agree that, when you're looking at two old men, I think we've moved past the idea where having a woman in charge is not a bad idea, right? I mean, we've seen women leaders in smaller countries around the world who have acted with success. We've had a female Speaker of the House. Other countries that we are very close with have had women lead them. I don't think that I think that issue gets amplified. I think it's pretty clear where those voters go, Kim. But what, to your point, is that she can energize them in ways that 81-year-old Joe Biden might not be able to do. She can get younger voters to say this vote matters, and she can articulate it in a way that Biden's unable to do, though it's pretty clear what the differences between the two are, I think, between Biden and Trump on the issue of reproductive rights. But I think that if you're going to use the Dobbs decision, it's best to have somebody who can scream it from the hills to the valleys to the hollers to the sea. I mean, that's what you need, and that's what Kamala Harris would certainly be able to do, and many others would be able to do. And it's an important election for that reason. And look, I mean, there's a chance there would be two women on this ticket, right? I mean, if Kamala Harris gets the nomination, and that's how the Democrats have this out, there's a chance that there would be another woman, whether it be Amy Klobuchar, whether it be Governor Whitmer Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. If they look at somebody else, that would be a kind of exciting thing for this country. Whether or not it would work, we don't know. But I think the energy behind a candidate, Barack Obama type energy, Ronald Reagan type energy, Bill Clinton type energy, that would change things a lot in this race.
Kim Champagne is saying, old people don't need reproductive rights, Kim. The seniors will decide this election. I don't know about that. In the midterms, you saw the women decide the election. You saw a big, robust presence on the part of women in this country. And that, so I don't know if I buy that.
You did, but that point is right, is that seniors vote more than young people do, right?
Of course,
so
that's true.
In that aspect. But I don't think seniors are going to not vote for, Democratic seniors are going to be an active voting majority no matter what. So to say that they wouldn't vote for who the Democratic nominee is, I think is probably not right.
Cheryl says, my older friends that will vote for Biden don't like Kamala. That worries me, Cheryl says.
And Cheryl's right, but Cheryl should listen to what I'm saying about the zeitgeist about Kamala now. It will be a different person. If she is the nominee, it will be a different energy, it will be a different presence, and there will be momentum behind her. You can't think of the vice president as the vice president now, were she to be the nominee, and to be to ascend to the nomination in a way that we haven't seen in any of our lifetimes in the history of this country, really.
I don't mean to assign blame always, but I do blame the Democrats a bit for running Kamala Harris down. I mean, whatever perception there might be, and I understand vice presidents are tagged with stuff that doesn't matter or whatever. They're kind of, but they gave her a real basket of bad stuff: the border, the drug problem. I mean, and I think she tried to do the things that you do when you're dealing with the border. You go down to Latin America, you try to arrange funding, you try to relieve the pressure, in effect, of migration at the border crossing. But that said, I feel as though they can successfully, I don't want to say rehabilitate, but, build up Kamala Harris's image. But I feel some of what has happened is a little bit their fault.
Well, I don't know if it's their fault or the way that our politics works. I mean, I don't know that. I think you're right about the fact that she can easily be built up, and whether or not she needs rehab, perhaps she does in the mind of several voters, the friends of some of the people who just wrote in. But I do think, and family, I think that what you're saying, look, it's one thing to say she's going to be the point person on immigration, but the administration has to back that. And the priorities of administration go to what will help the president. And that's just the natural course of American politics. So they're not looking out for helping the vice president. In fact, when things don't go right, it's much easier to blame a vice president than a president, especially when that president wants to be reelected. So you say, oh, immigration hasn't gone well. We charged the vice president with that. It didn't work out. Let's see what happens next time. But I'm going to take over next time, or whatever it is. So I think that, the vice president, the office of vice president in this country is a silly office. It's obviously necessary. I mean, there are 4 presidents who never had a vice president. There's nothing in the Constitution that says if a president dies that the vice president has to appoint another vice president. I mean, there's so many funny rules about that. Or there wasn't, at least until I think 66 or 67. So I just think that it's trust me on this. If she is the nominee, it's going to be different. Might not be better. I might not be right about that, but it's going to be a different vision of this person that will be out.
I want to get to Project 2025 in a moment, but I want you to answer this question from Jan. Michael Shure, do you think it's inevitable that Biden will be out since he is losing big donors?
I mean, it's not inevitable. If Biden stays in, most of that money comes back because the Democratic Party still, and the Democratic donors still want to defeat Donald Trump. If they say it's being withheld or frozen, were he to be the nominee and it be decided and it's set in stone, a lot of that money is going to come back. I think Biden will be out. First of all, I do say he's the president of the United States and he's the nominee of the Democratic Party. It's really up to him. And the Democrats have a little bit of time here. I don't think there is a ton of rush. First of all, the Republican convention is next week. And so to people like Jen, I would say that if you're looking at this as having to be a hurried process, it doesn't. I think Democrats want people to see who the Republican Party is. I think they want them to see who Donald Trump and whoever his vice presidential nominee is out there in public. They don't want to distract from that. And they also, the president's going to be out in the country next week. He's going to be in Austin at the LBJ Library, which, poetry,
which is weird.
which poetry would say he's the last person to drop out of a race, but he's accepting an award. This could be a good week for the president, but only he can decide this, and he will. And again, the pressure on him is there. It may not be public, but it's there. Some of it's starting to trickle in publicly. But I think there's a shot in the next 2 to 3 weeks. It's not going to be next week, in my opinion.
2025, this Project 2025, it's being mentioned now by Biden. I thought that was interesting. And I don't know how many Americans really are focused on it, and it's worth focusing on. I know people who watch this show and listen to the show know about it, and are focused on it. But it's essentially a template, a strategy, a 900-page strategy from the Heritage Foundation. We played some, I believe, some sound earlier this week from the guy who runs the Heritage Foundation now, the think tank, and it's draconian in its treatment of women's reproductive rights. But we don't, they reshape the entire federal government. There is essentially a gutting of the government that we know, and there is a new loyalist government put in place. I wonder if you could speak to two things. A, this Project 2025, and the degree to which you think specifics will stick to Trump and even get out into is it too complicated to get it out into the zeitgeist, or will it get out there?
The Democrats complicate things very often. They don't dumb them down to their discredit. And I don't mean dumb them down as wrong. Sometimes you have to be able to say what something is so that it's digestible very quickly for people, right? I mean, it's, Ford, whip inflation now, right? I mean, whatever was in the inflation articles when Ford was running for re-election in 1976, he was about getting rid of inflation. And you knew that. They have to condense these things. Democrats are not good at condensing them. If they say that what Project 2025 is, in essence, is a consolidation of and a further empowering of the executive branch, which plays like dictatorship. It's not, but it plays like dictatorship. If they're able to say that, and they're able to get people to say that, and they have Donald Trump on tape, on video, on audio saying, on my first day in office, I'm going to be a dictator. He meant, according to him, that it would just be that day, but you get the idea. They have to be able to condense this into something that's approachable, because it is a big, you said the word reshaping, that's what it is. They want to reshape American government. And they have the ear of a lot of the people that would be in a Trump White House. Many of them would be part of, former Heritage Foundation members who wrote this. And so that's
and former Trump White House.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, I'm saying in the future, but yes,
I'm
you're
sorry.
right.
Yeah. Okay.
That's who shaped this, and so it would behoove whoever the nominee is, and it's Biden right now, to talk about that as much as they can and start getting people's attention focused on it, because next week's coverage from the Republican convention in Milwaukee, where I will be, and we'll talk about how I get on this show from there. But that coverage is going to be a lot about the extreme right-wing hold that the Heritage Foundation and people of their ilk have on that party.
I want to get to down ballot, which we'll do in a second. I don't know. I mean, I can speak to this as well as you. Randy asks, ask Shure which parts of Project 2025 could realistically be implemented and how. There are a bunch of them could be realistically implemented. I mean, I think. Am I wrong, Mike? I mean, they would be disastrous, but they could be implemented.
Yeah, I think the most important part is taking control of the Justice Department, taking control of the Department of Commerce, like making those departments, making them partisan, basically, right? And undoing the evenness with which the government agency look. If there's a Democrat in charge, the secretary is a Democrat. If there's a Republican, the secretary is a Republican. But the rank and file, the people who go every day, those people have they have a job to do every day, whoever the head of the company is, and so I think that would be a big change, especially when it comes to the FBI, the Department of Justice. I think also that it's going to be very easy, or much easier, with executive support to bring the Christian right into the American politics, and I think that you're seeing that in small ways, but if it's part of executive order, that could be easily implemented. I could probably look at a list of things and say what would be most easy, but the Justice Department and I think the nationalizing of Christianity would be the two that I would look at.
Yeah, and the filling of these agencies with loyalists, Justice Department chief among them.
Partisan agencies is all you need to know. I mean, partisan.
That's exactly right. And of course, they're talking about closing down. They articulate the desire to close down the Department of Education, and
but that's a threat that's happened a lot, and that would be, if the gentleman or woman who just wrote in just now was skeptical of whether or not this could happen, or if it's just a lot of bluster. Closing the Department of Education is something we've heard from Republicans for a very long time. This stuff, you've seen it happening. You've seen the action behind it already, and making it partisan is different than actually eliminating it.
They depleted the State Department when they were in power, Michael, and it seems to me you can easily deplete and rob of funding the Department of Education, for example. Any of these government agencies can be rendered sort of husks just based on funding. Now,
for sure, and you're right. I mean, the perfect example is the Department of State, and that's executive power, right? Are we nominating ambassadors and consulates? Well, maybe not. We don't have to. We're not going to do it. So that is executive authority right there.
Anything else for Michael? Oh, I wanted to ask you about down-ballot races. Then I'll let you go, pal. You're so generous to be with us.
No Djokovic, no Alcaraz.
Don't say anything. I recorded it, and so much is going on this morning. Please, that was fine. We're fine, but I've been very careful not to get advisories or whatever. So
that's fine. I mean,
okay.
It's exciting to have Musetti in the semifinals. I love it.
All right. So I want to ask you about down-ballot. Just give me the realities on this. And when I see down-ballot, when I see those involved in down-ballot races beginning to question whether or not Biden should be part of the effort, I wonder, what are the realities on that in terms of the ripple effect that Biden has, positive and negative?
Well, it's what they're hearing from voters and advisors, and wanting not to be. Look, I think the president answered this question pretty well last night at the press conference. He said everybody who runs for a down ballot race, whether it's the House or the Senate, has a choice to distance themselves or attach themselves to the president. He gets it. He did it when he was running for Senate. Sometimes he'd want to run with, whether it be Carter or whether or Mondale or whomever, and sometimes you want to distance yourself from that person. The Senate is so tight right now that I can see senators like John Tester, like Jackie Rosen, senators in purple states or red states, having a difficult time with an association with a failing ticket. It's not so much the guy as it is the vulnerability of the guy. And when you're vulnerable in politics, it's terrible. So I think, I wouldn't sound alarm bells yet, because the polling is not sophisticated on House races in July before an election. But I would say that's going to be a determining factor in what Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer say to the president in trying to change course.
How much time do we have on this? What's
Look,
the
I think you have to go into the convention with a little momentum. The convention starts on the 19th of August, the Democratic Convention in Chicago. This is going to be known before then. I think the week after the Republican convention, you let their polling sit where it does, and then soon thereafter, between a week after the Republican convention and probably a week before the Democratic convention, this has to be determined and decided, and then people have to get behind President Biden or whoever is the other person. But if it is Biden and he's intransigent, Democrats are going to have to make their mind up that they've got to go with him.
So you're going to cover the Republican convention. Is that what you're going to do?
Yes, I am.
So that'll be next week
In Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Milwaukee. You have on the way out, any kind of prediction as to who the running mate will likely be for Donald Trump?
And I think a lot of what's happening on the Democratic side is determining that. I think Kim brought something up about a woman on the ticket. If there's a woman on the ticket, it changes the calculus for the Republicans who are trying to determine that. My guess is that it's going to be somebody who's non-controversial, somebody like Doug Burgum, former governor from North Dakota, or governor of North Dakota, people that aren't going to make a lot of splash, because if you have a lot of splash and the Democrats outsplash you, there's a risk. I'm overthinking it a little bit, but I think that they're going to go in the direction of more muted, but I could be, obviously way off. There are a lot of names out there.
Yeah, I mean, so that seems consistent with sort of Trump's general reflex move, which is to get somebody that he can dominate and that he can, you sit in the corner there and I'll let you know when I need you type thing.
Right, but having a woman on the ticket, even as an insurance policy, should it be Vice President Harris he's running against, is, I think, certainly something they're thinking about more.
Interesting. All right. Well, I hope we can work it out so that you can join us next week. But one way or the other, I appreciate you being here this week. And thank you for not talking more about tennis, because I am recording it all. I've been very busy. I watched some, but it takes time to watch these long 5-set matches.
That's true. And set aside time. So.
Yeah. So, but love our time together, and look for Michael.
I think we'll be able to pre-tape from the convention maybe next Thursday night.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay, we'll get that done then. How about it for Michael Shure, everybody? Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, guys.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.